I'm Lorraine Bishop. I used to believe that if I just stayed quiet, did the right things, and held the family together, love would follow. That if I kept showing up, eventually, someone would see me. But life has a way of asking harder questions the longer you avoid the truth. And one day, it asked me a question I couldn't ignore anymore. If you're still listening, I hope you'll stay until the end. Then, let me know in the comments. Did I do the right thing? Or was there something I should have done differently? I'd truly like to hear your thoughts. I remember that Monday like it was yesterday. The cold had crept in early that year, sharper than usual for Boise in late November. I was standing at the stove, stirring cocoa in a chipped navy blue pot, the kind I'd had since college. Micah was in the living room, humming along to some cartoon theme song. The smell of cinnamon and milk filled the air when my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't pick up. We'd spoken the week before, and I figured she was just calling to finalize plans for Thanksgiving. Still, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and answered. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "Lorraine," she replied, that clipped tone she always used when she had something to get off her chest. "I wanted to talk about Thanksgiving dinner." "Sure, you need me to bring something?" There was a pause. I could hear her shifting papers, or maybe it was just her fidgeting. "No, nothing like that. I've decided to keep it small this year, just adults." I blinked at the stove, the cocoa now starting to bubble. "Okay, so no kids?" "That's right," she said. "It'll be more peaceful. You know how loud it can get." Something in me sank, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "So Clay's kids aren't coming either?" She hesitated. "Well, they're older, and they behave. They don't run around or make a mess." I stood still, my hand frozen on the spoon. "Are you saying Micah doesn't behave?" There was silence. Not the kind that invites understanding, but the kind that makes your stomach turn. "I didn't say that," she murmured. But she didn't say anything else either. No backtrack, no softening. Just that wall of indifference she'd always built around herself whenever she knew she'd crossed a line, but didn't care enough to admit it. I let out a breath, half laugh, half disbelief. "Okay," I said, reaching for the phone to hang up. "I'll talk to you later," she added. I didn't reply. I ended the call, then stared at the phone in my hand for a long second. My reflection in the microwave looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept properly in months. I wiped the counter clean, turned the stove off, poured Micah's cocoa into his favorite blue mug, and walked it over to him like nothing happened. But that night, after putting him to bed and cleaning the kitchen again for the third time that day, I sat on the couch and sent my mother a text. Just one line. "If my child isn't welcome, then neither am I." And that was it. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't check for a read receipt. I just turned off my phone and sat in the dark, the kind of quiet that hums like an old fridge. There, but almost invisible. See, the thing is, I'd always been the reliable one, the one who remembered birthdays, picked up the phone when nobody else did, offered help even when no one asked. When my dad died, I became the emotional glue, without ceremony or acknowledgement. Clay got the garage tools. I got the expectations. I never questioned it much. I told myself that some people were meant to hold the weight of the family without being noticed. That maybe, if I kept doing what was right, eventually I'd be appreciated. But that phone call, it was like someone finally turned the lights on in a room I'd been sitting in for years. She didn't see Micah as family, not in the way she saw Clay's kids. And by extension, she didn't see me. Not fully, not fairly. That realization didn't explode. It settled, quiet and cold, like frost on a windowpane. I thought about all the times I'd driven an hour to help her reset the Wi-Fi or mow the lawn. All the weekends I'd rearranged to be there for her when Clay was too busy. All the holidays I'd spent watching her beam at him while I cleared dishes. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just tired. Tired in a way I hadn't let myself feel for decades. So I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I didn't try to fix it. I just stepped back. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is stop showing up where you're only ever seen as useful. I used to think I was holding the family together, but that night, cocoa mug still sitting on the coffee table, I realized maybe I was the only one still trying. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop. The next morning, I did what I always do. I got up before the sun, packed Micah's lunch, and checked my email while the coffee brewed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow or throw my phone across the room. I just moved, like a woman on autopilot, running a program I'd been running since the day my husband walked out. At work, the fluorescent lights hummed too loudly. The air conditioner kicked in every 10 minutes, even though it was freezing outside, and my desk felt colder than usual. But I sat there anyway, answering emails, adjusting spreadsheets, sending payroll approvals like nothing in my life had cracked open 12 hours before. That's the thing about women like me. We don't have the luxury of falling apart, especially not in public. By noon, I was at Juniper and Sage with Callie. We always met there on Tuesdays. Two single moms pretending we had time for real breaks, sipping lukewarm coffee and sharing stories in between bites of salad. She took one look at me, narrowed her eyes, and said, "You look like someone who just dodged a tornado, or maybe got hit by one and didn't realize it yet." I gave her a half-hearted smile, poking at my spinach with my fork. "My mom called yesterday." Callie sat back. "Oh boy, that tone says this is going to be good." I hesitated, then told her everything: the phone call, the comment about Micah, the silence that followed. I kept my voice calm, but my hands wouldn't stop fiddling with my napkin. When I finished, she just stared at me for a second, shaking her head slowly. "That's not just petty," she said. "That's textbook conditional love. You either toe the line, or you get labeled the difficult one." I laughed, but it didn't sound like me. "She just wants a quiet dinner. I mean, Micah can be a little energetic." Callie leaned forward. "Lorraine, come on. Your boy's sweet. He's 9. Of course he's loud sometimes. That's not a flaw. It's childhood." "I just don't want him to grow up without a grandmother," I said quietly, eyes fixed on the rim of my coffee cup. Callie didn't blink. "I don't want my girls growing up thinking love means being tolerated." That shut me up. Because she was right, and I knew it. But hearing it out loud, it hits different. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "You know what really gets me?" I said after a pause. "Last spring, I asked Mom if Micah could sleep over one weekend, just so I could have a quiet night. She said the house was too small, and she didn't have the energy." Callie raised an eyebrow. "And?" A week later, Clay's kids spent the whole weekend there. She posted pictures of them baking cookies and doing puzzles like it was a Norman Rockwell painting. Callie didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence was the kind that wrapped around you and gave you permission to feel what you were trying not to feel. I didn't confront her, I added. Didn't say a word. I just swallowed it, like always. "You think that makes you weak?" I nodded. She shook her head. "Number that makes you conditioned. Big difference." That word, conditioned, hung in the air like smoke. I'd never heard it put quite like that. But it felt true. Every time I bit my tongue, every time I brushed something off to keep the peace, every time I put someone else's comfort ahead of my own boundaries. "That's what they teach girls like us," Callie said, softer now. "Keep the peace. Don't raise your voice. Smile even when it hurts." I looked out the window. The wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like they were trying to escape something. "You know what's wild?" I said, more to myself than to her. "I've never once said I'm tired, like it was a reason to stop. I always thought being tired meant I needed to push harder." Callie placed her hand over mine, warm, steady. "And maybe now," she said, "you're finally tired enough to stop." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone in the room. I felt seen, understood. I let out a slow breath, one that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for years. "I'm tired, Cal," I whispered. So damn tired. She squeezed my hand. Then maybe that's all the reason you need. Clay called me the next day, right as I was packing up to leave the office. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die hard. And when it comes to family, sometimes you pick up even when every part of you says not to. Hey sis, he said, voice soft in that way people use when they know they're about to say something you won't like. Got a minute? Barely, I replied, grabbing my coat. What's up? I talked to Mom, he started, and I could already feel the weight of where this was going. She's upset, says you're not returning her calls. I let the silence sit for a beat. She told you why? I asked. Well, she said you got a little offended about the Thanksgiving thing. Lorraine, come on. She's just trying to keep the peace. You know how she is. That was the line, wasn't it? You know how she is. As if that excused everything. As if her patterns of disregard and dismissal were quirks, not wounds. She said Micah wasn't invited because he's a kid. Clay added. It's not personal. I laughed under my breath. It's always not personal, until you look close enough to see that it absolutely is. He sighed. You're making Mom feel bad, that's all I'm saying. Good, I snapped. Maybe she should feel something. There was a pause on the other end, and then that calm, patronizing tone he always slipped into when things got uncomfortable. Look, I'm just saying. Don't blow this out of proportion. You know how she is. And there it was again. A tidy little phrase used to wrap up years of imbalance, like it was a minor inconvenience instead of a decades-long pattern of erasure. She wants what's best, he added. I pressed the phone harder to my ear. For who, Clay? For who? He didn't answer that, just shifted the topic, said something about how he hoped I'd still come to his birthday thing next month. I didn't respond. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I sat in my car for 10 minutes after that, just breathing, just trying to find a way to make the hurt feel less sharp. What I realized, sitting in that cold driver's seat, was that no one had asked me how I felt. Not my mother, not my brother, no one. They only cared that I was disrupting the image. The family photo they liked to pretend was still intact. My silence had always served them. My distance, though, my absence, was suddenly a problem. That night, I got an email from my cousin, forwarded from my mother. A group message sent to a dozen relatives. It was dressed up in civility, but I could feel the daggers between the lines. I worry Lorraine is not herself lately, my mother wrote. She seems withdrawn, maybe even resentful. I've always done my best as a mother, but some people, well, they can't let go of old bitterness, especially when they see others doing well. No names, just enough implication. Enough venom sugar-coated in concern to make me feel like I was being dissected in a church prayer circle. She might be struggling emotionally, it continued, and I pray for her heart to soften. My cousin, bless her heart, added a note when she sent it to me. I'm sure she didn't mean it the way it sounds. Maybe you two can talk this out. She is your mom. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But all I felt was stillness, cold and heavy, like a lake just before it freezes over. It wasn't the email itself. It was the familiarity of it, the public martyrdom, the private manipulation, the way she'd always managed to twist my boundaries into betrayals, my exhaustion into disrespect. And I realized something, sitting there, rereading that message. I'd spent years trying not to be the problem. I'd gone quiet instead of honest, compliant instead of authentic. And still, here I was, the villain in her story. So I stood up, walked over to my kitchen window, stared out into the dark, and sent one text. Just one. You've just confirmed why stepping away was the right choice. No more explaining, no more defending, no more reaching for a woman who never once tried to meet me halfway. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Callie sent the screenshot. I'd come home early from work. Too many hours at a screen. Too few reasons to pretend I cared about quarter-end reports. The house was quiet, except for the sound of Micah in the living room, building his Lego city like it was Manhattan after a hurricane. He was humming to himself, making up stories about the Great Brick War, his voice rising and falling with each crash and cheer. I was at the kitchen table, trying to finish expense reports while sipping lukewarm coffee. My phone buzzed next to my elbow. I almost ignored it. But then I saw her name, Callie. The message was short, just a blurry screenshot and a note. Tell Lorraine her mom's transferring the house to Clay. Friend from the title office just processed the file. That was it. No explanation, no warning. Just another quiet erasure I wasn't meant to find out about. At least not yet. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb frozen over the glass. I wasn't shocked, not really. Somewhere deep down, I think I'd already known. But still, there was that small, traitorous flicker of hope that flared and died inside me. I didn't want the house. I've never cared about square footage or property lines. But I guess I thought, maybe, just maybe, some things would be fair. Or at least acknowledged, that I'd be remembered, if not rewarded. Instead, she was giving it all to him. Quietly, as if I'd already been written out. I closed the laptop. The screen dimmed into black. I sat in silence, the hum of the fridge suddenly louder than everything else. Micah's voice rose behind me. And then the space robots attacked the Lego tower. He laughed, pure, unfiltered, unaware of anything except the world he was building, block by block. My heart cracked a little at the sound of it. How long would he get to keep that lightness before someone told him who he should be or who he wasn't enough for? My mind drifted, uninvited, back to a memory I hadn't touched in years. I was 9. I had just broken a glass at dinner. I'd been trying to carry too many things at once, desperate to help, to be seen. The glass slipped from my hands and shattered across the linoleum. The room went still. My mother's voice was sharp, immediate. Can't you be more careful, Lorraine? Honestly, the next night, Clay spilled an entire pitcher of iced tea. He laughed. Mom chuckled with him, brushing it off. Boys will be boys, she said. That line lived in my bones. It had shaped me more than I realized. I thought of college, how I'd spent nights filling out FAFSA forms by myself, researching scholarships until my eyes blurred. How I'd worked 2 part-time jobs just to afford books. Meanwhile, Clay got a car. Mom sold her old Buick to pay for his textbooks and dorm room. She never even asked if I needed help, because I always figured it out, because I never asked, because I was reliable. I looked at the screenshot again. My stomach twisted, but the burn wasn't anger. It was grief. The quiet, lingering kind that doesn't explode, just lingers in the corners of your body until you stop pretending it's not there. Later that night, Micah was in the shower, belting out some ridiculous remix of a Taylor Swift song and Star Wars theme music. I stood at the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, staring not at my reflection, but at my eyes. And I saw it. That same tired weight I used to see in my mother. That look I used to think was strength. But it wasn't. It was silence. Generational silence. And I'd worn it like a badge my whole life. If I kept this up, this swallowing, this self-editing, what would I be teaching Micah? That love means disappearing? That being the good one means being invisible? I leaned on the sink, toothbrush forgotten. My voice was low, barely audible, but it shook the quiet anyway. Not him, not me, not anymore. Later that night, once Micah was asleep and the dishes were done and the house had settled into that deep evening hush, I went to the drawer and pulled out an old piece of stationery, blue flowers along the top, the kind I hadn't used in years. Not an email, not a text, a letter, something with weight. I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote, Mom, if I've always been the shadow, then I need to stop living in a house that has no light for me. I paused. My hand trembled, not from anger, but from release, from finally naming the thing I'd carried for years without words. I don't want your house. I never did. I wanted to be seen. But since you never could, I'm done waiting in doorways that never open. I didn't sign it. I didn't fold it. I left it sitting on the kitchen table like a prayer I didn't need answered. And then I turned out the light. Thursday morning at the office felt like any other. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, reviewing vendor invoices, when the front desk buzzed my line. "Lorraine," Stephanie said, voice unsure. "There's an older woman asking for you. Says she's your mom." I froze. Just sat there for a second, staring at the phone. Mom? At my office? She had never once visited me at work. Not when I got promoted. Not when I changed jobs. Not even when I won that small business award 2 years ago and had my photo on the company website. My mind raced. What was she doing here? What now? Okay, I managed. Tell her I'll be right out. I stood up slowly, smoothed my sweater, checked my reflection in the window. Hair neat, face calm, shoulders squared. I slipped into the hallway like I was heading into court. When I stepped into the front lobby, there she was, Eloise Bishop, my mother, wearing her church coat like armor, clutching her purse like it held every grudge she'd ever carried. She didn't smile, didn't say hello, just looked me up and down like she was checking for cracks. "I thought we should clear the air," she said, loud enough for the receptionist to glance over. "I didn't raise a daughter to act this way." I felt every eye in the room shift toward me. That familiar heat rose in my neck, the one I used to feel when she scolded me in the grocery store for grabbing the wrong cereal. I forced a tight smile. "Let's talk in the break room." We walked down the hallway in silence. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I could feel my coworkers looking up from their desks, sensing tension without knowing why. Inside the break room, I gestured toward the table. She didn't sit. "I've heard things," she said, standing by the counter like a judge at a bench. "You're telling people I mistreat you? That I favor your brother?" I stayed quiet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. "You're embarrassing me, Lorraine. Clay's embarrassed too. I've been getting messages. Your cousin even called to ask if I was okay. What are you telling people?" I crossed my arms. "Nothing. That's the point. I've stopped covering for you." Her eyes narrowed. "I told you it was an adults-only dinner. That's not a crime." "No," I said, voice steady. "But the way you said it was." She scoffed. "You're twisting everything. I did my best. I raised you. I worked 2 jobs after your father died. I gave you a roof, food, everything. And this is how you repay me?" "You gave me structure," I said quietly, "but not presence. You gave Clay love. You gave me responsibility." She stepped closer, her voice sharper now. "You're ungrateful." There it was. That old accusation, pulled out like a dagger whenever the conversation got too close to truth. Then she said it. The line that sliced deeper than she knew. "You can divorce a husband, Lorraine, but you don't get to divorce your mother. Whether you like it or not, I am your family." I took a slow breath. Everything inside me went quiet. "No, Mom," I said. "I didn't divorce you. But you divorced me a long time ago. When you made Clay the golden child and made me the one who had to hold everything together. When you expected me to understand everything and expected nothing from him. You chose who mattered." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she didn't have a script. She reached for the same tired refrain. "You should be grateful." "I'm done being grateful for crumbs," I said, my voice low but firm. "I spent years thinking if I just did enough, was good enough, you'd notice me. But I've stopped mistaking survival for love." The air between us crackled with something heavy. Grief, maybe, or years of words left unsaid. She tried one more time. "I was a good mother." "You were a mother who did her duty," I replied. "That's not the same thing." We stood there, 2 women, generations apart, bound by blood, but little else. Then I walked to the door, opened it, and looked at her one last time. "If you came here looking for someone still desperate to earn your approval," I said, "you came to the wrong place." She didn't respond, just turned, lifted her purse strap higher on her shoulder, and walked out of the room. I didn't slam the door behind her. I just sat down at the break room table, heart pounding in a way that didn't feel like fear. It felt like freedom. I got home that evening and kicked off my shoes at the door like I was dropping the weight of the whole day. My feet ached, my back was stiff, but my chest, oddly, felt light. Lighter than it had in years. I had faced her. I had said the words I never thought I'd say. And while the ground under me still felt unfamiliar, like I was learning how to stand again, there was something freeing in finally choosing myself. Micah was building a tower out of cereal boxes and duct tape in the living room. He looked up, grinned, and said, "Hey Mom, look, I made a castle." I smiled. "Looks stronger than most houses I've lived in." He beamed. I walked past him and straight into the kitchen, opened the fridge without any real appetite, and then just leaned on the counter. That's when I heard the knock. It was Callie. She stood there holding a pie box in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. "Looked like you had a day," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invite. "And I come bearing carbs and alcohol. Crisis protocol." I laughed, genuinely. "You're the best kind of emergency responder." She set the pie on the counter, popped the cork with that little keychain opener she always kept in her purse, and poured us 2 generous glasses. "No one's ever been too broken for pie and wine," she said, raising her glass. We sat at the kitchen table, legs folded underneath us, and talked until the clock slipped past midnight. I told her everything, no sugarcoating, no quick edits to make it sound prettier. I told her about the time I broke Mom's favorite vase at age 11 and had my allowance docked for 3 months. The time Clay crashed the family car and still got a new one for graduation. The time Mom told me, "You're too emotional," when I cried after my miscarriage. I didn't cry that night, but I felt every word burn on its way out. At one point, Callie reached across the table, her hand warm over mine. "Lorraine," she said gently, "you do realize none of that was your fault, right?" I stared down into my wine glass. I used to think if I did everything right, if I got good grades, got the degree, stayed quiet, helped her, I thought she'd see me, really see me, maybe even love me the way she loves Clay. She didn't let go of my hand. "But I was wrong," I whispered, "not because I wasn't good enough, but because—" She never left room for two. Callie's eyes softened. "Then don't keep fighting for a seat in a house that locked the door on you a long time ago." That hit me right in the center of my chest, like someone had finally opened a window in a room I didn't realize I'd been suffocating in. We didn't say much after that, just sat in the quiet. The kind of quiet that holds you instead of closing in. The next morning, before I even brushed my teeth, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic monthly transfer I'd been sending to my mother for the past 5 years. She never asked for it, but she never declined it either, just accepted it, like she accepted everything I gave. Silently, as if it were expected. After that, I opened my email. I didn't rage, I didn't justify. I just typed, "Mom, I'm stepping away from family gatherings and shared responsibilities. Not out of anger, but because I need to create a healthy space for me and my son. I wish you well." I read it twice, added a period, and hit send. Micah wandered into the kitchen while I was pouring cereal. His hair stuck up in 5 directions, his voice still scratchy with sleep. "Are we going to Grandma's for Christmas?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. I knelt down, touched his cheek. "No, honey," I said gently. "We're only going to places where you're loved just the way you are. No conditions." He blinked, then nodded. "Okay, can we go to Callie's instead? Her girls have a trampoline." I smiled. "Yeah, baby, that sounds perfect." And just like that, I knew. We were going to be just fine. I hadn't planned to go to Clay's birthday party. Honestly, I thought I was done with all of it. Family functions, polite smiles, pretending I didn't see the way my name got smaller in every room I stepped into. But then the card came. It was from Erin, Clay's wife. simple cream-colored stationery with her neat handwriting on the front. Inside was a short message. I know things are complicated, but I didn't want to assume you weren't invited. Micah's always welcome. And I don't want him growing up thinking women have to shrink to be accepted. Hope to see you both. It caught me off guard. The kindness, the quiet courage behind it. And it wasn't just the gesture, it was the way she acknowledged it all without needing to spell it out. So I went. Not because I wanted to fix anything, not to mend fences or make peace, but because I wanted closure. And I wanted Micah to see what it looked like when a woman stood her ground. The party was held at Clay's house, a 2-story place in a polished neighborhood with manicured lawns and a backyard that looked straight out of a catalog. Micah ran off with his cousins the second we stepped in. I stayed by the door for a moment, taking it all in. People glanced up when they saw me, the kind of look that hangs in the air half a second too long. Eloise made her way over, arms open in a warm, too bright kind of way. "There you are," she said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "I told Clay you'd come around." I smiled politely. "We're here for Micah." She blinked but recovered quickly. "Well, of course. It's good to see you, Lorraine." The room was decorated with silver balloons and framed photos of Clay through the years. Graduation, his wedding, fishing trips with Mom. None with me in them. I wasn't surprised. Dinner was served buffet style. Everyone gathered around the long oak table, laughing, passing rolls, and complimenting the casserole. The air felt stiff to me, like everyone was trying too hard to pretend there weren't any cracks in the foundation. Then it happened. One of Clay's old high school friends raised a glass. "To Clay," he said with a grin, "the golden boy, and the best son a mom could ask for." There was a ripple of laughter. Someone clapped. And then a voice, one of my aunts, chimed in, just loud enough. "It's true. He's always been the one who stayed close, the good son." The room went still for half a second. My fork hovered above my plate. I put it down. I looked around the table and spoke. Not loudly, but clearly. "The good son? Or the chosen one?" Every head turned. Eloise stiffened. "Lorraine, let's not—" "No," I said gently. "Let's. Just for once." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to be honest. For years, I've played my role. The helpful one. The quiet one. The daughter who didn't ask for much. And for years, that worked. For you. I looked straight at her. But it didn't work for me. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. I don't need a title. I don't need to be the good one or the difficult one or anything in between. I just need to stop pretending that this dynamic, this silence, this hierarchy, is normal. The table was silent. I took a breath, steadied my voice. From today forward, I'm stepping out. Out of the expectation, out of the performance. You don't need to worry about me anymore, Mom. You've already chosen who matters. And I'm finally choosing myself. Then I picked up my purse, found Micah near the back door, and nodded. We walked out into the night air, cool and clean, the kind of quiet that makes you breathe deeper. In the car, as I buckled him in, Micah looked up at me. "Are we mad at Grandma?" he asked softly. I paused, then shook my head. "No, sweetheart, we're not mad." He nodded, thoughtful, then added, "You don't have to be the nice one all the time. You just have to be my mom." I smiled through the sting in my eyes, took his hand. "That," I said, "I can do." A week passed after Clay's birthday party, and I didn't hear a word from my mother. No calls, no texts, no guilt-laced voicemails, nothing. And strangely, it felt good. Micah seemed to adjust faster than I did. I'd catch him humming while brushing his teeth or drawing dragons on the back of grocery receipts without a single question about Grandma. It was like he instinctively knew that the air in our home had changed, that whatever had been tense and heavy had finally lifted. Me, I was still learning how to sit with the quiet, the kind that doesn't ache. I stopped checking my phone every night before bed. stopped replaying old arguments in the shower, stopped writing imaginary replies to the apology I knew would never come. Then one afternoon, my Aunt Susan called. She was my mom's younger sister, softer in every way, always the one to quietly send a card or drop off soup when someone was sick. I hadn't talked to her in months. "Lorraine," she said gently, "your mom's been upset. She says she doesn't understand how things got so distant." I smiled sadly. "That's because she doesn't want to understand. She just wants things to go back to the way they were. She says you shut her out." "I did," I said, "but only after decades of knocking and getting no answer." There was a long pause on the other end. Then Susan sighed. "I get it," she said softly. "More than you think." And I believed her, because there was something in her voice, tired but honest, that sounded a lot like mine. A few mornings later, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Tight, perfect cursive, like someone afraid of taking up too much space on the page. I sat down at the kitchen table, the envelope shaking slightly in my hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no date. "I don't know how to be the mother you want," she wrote. "I never have. I thought doing my duty was enough. Maybe I was wrong, but that's all I knew." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just those few lines, like a thread pulled loose from a very old, tightly woven fabric. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just sat there, watching the sunlight stretch across the counter, and thought, that may be the first honest thing she's ever said to me. And maybe it was the last thing I needed. In the weeks that followed, life shifted gently into something new. I transferred Micah to a small charter school closer to home. It cost a little more, but he came home every day with stars on his papers and stories about his kind-hearted teacher, Ms. Vance. He seemed taller somehow, more sure of himself. We started spending our Saturdays differently. Pancake breakfasts with music playing low in the background, afternoons at the park, or driving out to the foothills with Callie and her girls. I taught Micah how to make scrambled eggs without burning them. He taught me how to slow down long enough to enjoy them. One Sunday, we sat in the backyard painting rocks, Micah's new obsession. He looked up at me and said, "You laugh more now." I looked at him, stunned. "I do?" He nodded. "Since we stopped going to Grandma's." That night, I couldn't sleep. But it wasn't restlessness, it was gratitude. Like something broken had finally mended, even if it healed into a different shape. The next week, I went to Juniper and Sage, my favorite corner table by the window. I brought my laptop, ordered my usual latte, and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked at me like a question. Then I typed, "I used to believe that being a good mother meant sacrificing everything. But now I know being a good mother means showing your child how to stand tall, even if it means standing alone." Halfway through the first paragraph, Micah ran in from the sidewalk, a paper cup of hot cocoa in his hand. "Mom," he said, breathless, "remember the day you told me we weren't going to Grandma's anymore?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do." "I thought you were sad," he said. "But then, after that, you started laughing more, and your hugs got warmer." I reached for him, pulling him into my lap, his cocoa still warm between us. "That's because, baby," I whispered into his hair. "That was the day I finally came home to myself." Maybe you've been there too, trying to keep the peace, holding it all in, telling yourself it's not that bad. But somewhere deep down, you knew it was. And it's okay if it took time to say it out loud. It took me over 40 years. I don't think healing always looks like a big moment. Sometimes, it's just the quiet choice to stop showing up where your heart isn't safe. Have you ever made a choice like that? If this story touched something in you, I'd be honored to have you with me in the next one. Let's keep walking through these stories, together.